Andrew, talking about performance bonuses, what is the difference between performance management and discipline? Because you find that, like I said in the beginning, prior, people in businesses, it's about emotion. I manage you emotionally because yes, it's my business, it's my baby, and you are in my baby's space. This is my business. Now, performance management and discipline. When can I discipline people using performance management, but also when can I discipline people and then punish them by sort of a bonus or lack of a bonus, even if it's in my contract?
Eddie, that's a vitally important question, and it would fall within what is generally accepted as a rather misunderstood topic within both big and small business. Mm-hmm. It requires me to define essentially what could be called misconduct, yes, and what would be poor performance. Misconduct essentially relates to anything that is derived from the conduct of an employee, whereas performance relates specifically to the skill and of an employee. Where it gets rather difficult is in relation to issues around poor quality of work. Is the issue at hand an issue of not having the skill to do it, in other words, a performance issue, and not having the capacity to do it? Or is it an issue where somebody has the capacity to do it, but they were just negligent? If it is a negligence issue, that would fall under the banner of what is typically defined as a misconduct issue. Whereas if it is a capacity issue, it would fall under the banner of what is a performance issue. Now we have the differences sort of firmly established, and summarized version, the difference is if anything relates to the will of an employee, it's misconduct. If it relates to the skill, it's performance. There is a difference also in terms, and this is where the misunderstanding often comes. In misconduct issues, you typically would be required to deal with the matter procedurally. Last session round, we talked about the issue of progressive and substantive issues, and procedural and substantive issues rather, sorry. Misconduct is dealt with progressively. In other words, you start at the lowest form of warning, which would typically be a verbal warning, and you proceed progressively to the next level of discipline in the case of a recurrence of an area of misconduct, or alternately of perhaps something which is serious misconduct. So you would follow the different levels, ranging from verbal warning, written warnings, through to final written warnings, and eventually somebody could end up having their service terminated as a result of misconduct. Typically, with poor performance, and this is where the misunderstanding comes, within both small and big business, managers are dealing with it exactly the same as misconduct, and their cases are being jeopardized when they are taken on dispute. Poor performance is dealt with very differently. Although it is still progressive, the vehicle to effecting that progressive correction that you've talked about earlier is very different. You would first start off with a counseling session to explain to the employee what the required standards of performance are, and those standards would be spelt out typically in terms of a job description or a job profile, if you will. You then would allow the employee the opportunity to show some form of improvement to meeting those standards, and to make sure that they are aware that they are not meeting the standards. Maybe there's a standard of performance that an employee is not aware of, and it's never been communicated, it's never been documented and put in writing to that employee. Then I think it would be unfair to hold the person to have performed poorly if they're not aware of that. So those things need to be firmed up during a counseling session, and a reasonable period needs to be allowed and permitted to them to be able to show that they can in fact meet those standards of performance. And that period is really defined by the requirements of the specific position. If you're talking about a cleaner, a cleaner might have a week as a reasonable period to show improvement. Whereas if you're talking about higher level positions, let's talk about a finance manager or a compliance officer, you might want to give them an extended period to show that they can improve to the level required and defined in terms of those performance standards. And that really is the process. And if the person and the employee is then still not performing, you would then invite them to an incapacity hearing. And if they are indeed deemed to be continuously underperforming or performing poorly, they would be deemed to be incapacitated as a result of poor performance, and their contract of employment would then be terminated at that point as a result of the incapacity hearing.